At the beginning of chapter 8, Much Afraid is very excited to see that the path they are on turned to the mountains. And she was so excited that she let go of sorrow and suffering hands and ran ahead. But as she kept running, the path took a sharp turn away from the mountains again. And she stood there in dismay and shock, and bitterness popped up and began laughing and mocking her. Sorrow and suffering caught back up to her just before a sandstorm came through. After the sandstorm, Much Afraid calls out to the great shepherd and asks him what he would like to speak to her. This is the first time that she has responded in this way, in her dismay, in confusion, to just turn to him and ask him what he would like to speak to her. And so the great shepherd comes and asks Much Afraid to build an altar to put her whole will on and to sacrifice that. And she does. The great shepherd then walks with Much Afraid and Sorrow and Suffering until they get to a seawall, which takes them over where the ocean comes into the desert. So the great shepherd leaves them at that point, and Much Afraid and Sorrow and Suffering walk across the seawall. As they're walking across, Much Afraid was thinking about how the great shepherd has helped her to be triumphant over her enemies, and she picked up a rock from the seawall in remembrance of that. At the end of the seawall, Much Afraid and her companions came into a beautiful wooded area, and it seemed to be like spring had sprung everywhere they looked, flowers and birds, and it was a beautiful sight. Much Afraid felt a stirring in her heart, and she remembered that the shepherd told her when the flower in her heart was almost ready to bloom, that she would get a new name, that she would be loved in return, and be able to enter the high places. But Much Afraid knew that she was still so far from the high places, so she didn't know how that could be soon. Then Much Afraid noticed that there was a golden replica of the flower she found blooming in the desert that was called Acceptance with Joy. And it reminded Much Afraid that she was to accept with joy whatever path the shepherd led her down. So she took that flower from her heart and laid it on an altar. And the flame that came up and took the flower, a part of that went back into her heart and continued this flame there. So there was a rock on the altar where her offering was, and she collected that rock and took that with her to remember that. Then, as her and Sorrow and Suffering continued, when they came through the woods, they found the great shepherd sitting and waiting for them. And he told Much Afraid that she is to be ready for something new, which brought her so much excitement because that it sounded to her like she was going to be going to the high places next. The first lesson that stood out to me in chapter 8 was, instead of our goal being to eliminate our trials, instead we need to focus on calling out to God quicker when the trials come. So we see for Much Afraid in this chapter, when she was running ahead because she thought the path was leading towards the mountains again, and she got so far ahead of Sorrow and Suffering, and all of a sudden there was the big turn in the path, and she just stood there in disbelief and could hear bitterness mocking her from far away. And a sandstorm was coming. And in that moment, she just asked the Lord what he would like to speak to her. So this is the first time that we see her do this, when she's not, when she's not already under attack and then calling out to the Lord, or when it's in like complete disbelief and just more asking, like, this can't be what you're asking me to do, can it? Right? Like, she has called out to the Lord in those ways, but this time it was simply, what would you like to speak to me? And that shows her faith that he will help her through this. And so, for us, when we are focused and hoping that, okay, that the trials that we've been through the worst, we're not going to have any other big trials, or we're trying to do what we can to control, which is, it's out of our control, but thinking we can control hardship and trials that come our way. We're putting all of our energy into that. And then when something does come, it causes this this anger and this frustration with God. But when we look at it like Scripture teaches us to know that there will be many trials, but that Jesus has overcome death, that he has given us peace, that he helps us through it, then it gives us a different way to respond when trials come. And that's what we see Much Afraid doing in chapter 8. The second lesson that I took from chapter 8 is that focusing on God's victories in the midst of our trials reminds us of what is true. So when Much Afraid was walking across the seawall, and she's still far from where she wants to be, she still doesn't really know what God's doing. There's a lot of things she can focus on that could give her doubt, but she chooses to focus on the victories that the Lord has accomplished, and how frustrated her enemies must be with all these times they try to stop her, and that she's able to overcome them with the Great Shepherd's help. When we focus on what God has done in our life, whether it's, usually there's still something within whatever we're experiencing that God is doing, or what God has previously done, or what the immense things in Scripture, right? That we know, the victories God has back then, but also eternally. This reminds us of the truth that none of our trials last forever, that God is faithful, and we will see his faithfulness again, even if we're not feeling it in that moment. And this leads into the third lesson that I took from chapter 8, that just as winter always gives way to spring, none of our trials will last forever. The part of this chapter where Much Afraid comes into this beautiful forest, and then out of the trees, and there's birds and flowers, and she talks about feeling like she's experiencing spring for the first time, as if she has come out of winter, even though she was in a desert. But there's a lot of similarities in between deserts and winter, mostly the lack of just growing things that represent life. And so she comes into this space that has so much representation of life and beauty. And it's a reminder that whatever season we are in, it doesn't last forever. Some are shorter, some are much longer, but it doesn't last forever. That is a promise that God has given us that we can hold on to. So I hope that these have been encouraging to you as they have been to me, and I look forward to going through the next chapter with you.